Evening, everybody. Thanks all for coming. Right, I'll tell you a little bit about myself before we get started, just so you know what my background is and what I'm going to be looking for in Laura's Reel. I'm from the third floor. I don't know, has anybody heard of third floor or are familiar with work that we've done? A few people here. Well, for those of you who don't know what we do, we are sort of a pre-visualization company, or actually it's a visualization company now. Previs is so last year. So we do animatics for film, television, games. We also do visualization for theme park rides, all sorts, VR work, everything, basically whatever sort of major feature films that have come out recently that have loads of CG elements in, we've probably worked on. So myself, I've been for the last 3 years working on Game of Thrones, so that is my thing. So now I'm trying to find another project which will keep me just as busy, preferably not having dragons in it. So if I see another dragon, I think I might go, spontaneously combust. So, yeah, so we create sort of miniature animatics, and we've got a strong focus on cinematography and camera work as well as animation. So I'm going to potentially pull up sort of notes on cameras as well as animation in this, because I sort of feel that for an animation reel, it's one of those features that is really overlooked by a lot of artists, not just students, but people in the industry as well. And what you do with cameras can be really important in terms of storytelling, and it should be made more of a focus, because I know from experience when we look at show reels, we're looking for someone who can actually tell a story and go, right, I want to animate, I want to work in film or television, I want to tell stories. We want to be able to see that you can put together shots that will cut together and tell a story and create some sort of emotion in that as well. So looking at cinematography is really important, as well as lighting and all sorts, because we don't just do animation, we do everything. We basically create blueprints for what final shots will look like. So we look at what visual effects are going to be needed, CG extensions, backgrounds, lighting, animation, camera work. We sort of do it all. So we're sort of, we're not experts at everything, but we sort of know quite a lot about everything. So that's where we come from. So I'm going to be looking at Laura's Reel, which I'll play for you guys, because I know that you wouldn't have seen everything, or you wouldn't have seen it at all. So I'll play that through a couple of times, and then I will sort of break it into its constituent parts, and we'll look at it section by section, and we can sort of see how that works. Oops, sorry, this is the wrong thing. I thought that was the whole reel. There we go. Sorry, Laura.
You did?
Yes.
Did I accept?
Yes. I'm going on a date.
Yes, you are.
Oh, man. I can't believe this. I finally get asked out on a date and I missed it.
Okay. So there we go. So that is Laura's Reel. The first thing I thought was it absolutely looks lovely. It's a really high quality visual reel in terms of the quality of the renders and things, which is something that we don't often see very often. Most of the times you get something that kind of just looks like a play blast, and just by adding that quality, paying attention to the renders, we had some sort of reflections, the lighting was nice. It was, there was nothing offensive in there that sort of really made it, sort of stand out. I mean, if you're doing an animation reel, it's not necessarily something that you really need to worry about if that's all you're going to be submitting and you're just going in as an animator. But if you're looking to potentially become a Previs artist, that's something that we go, you know what, they know what they're doing, and it's you know, quite nice to see. So let's break this up into little sections. Let's have a wee look at shot one. So we've got little Judy here. This animation was really quite sweet, actually. You notice in the reel, Laura had broken it up into sort of 4 little sections. I mean, it's sort of a personal preference as to if you like that or not. I actually quite enjoyed it. I felt it sort of broke the reel up, and it sort of, you had a little story with a little punchline at the end, a little bit of a laugh, and I sort of found that quite amusing and sort of more memorable in my head. So if you can have something like that in your reel, it really helps, and it's sort of like, oh, you know what, that was great. And it, you know, potentially just playing this all the way through, it's, you know, a relatively long animation, and the reel is only 1 minute long. So, you know, probably a good maybe 20-30 seconds is this on its own. And, you know, you don't necessarily want to just go, right, I'm going to play this really long thing and then have a couple of little short things at the end. I think breaking it up really helped. You know, you could just see bang, 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 this is what she's done. And, you know, this was a fun little thing to end on. So I think that worked quite successfully. In terms of animation on this, you know, it's gorgeous. There's some really lovely little things going on in here. She's got just the little reactions. I sort of think, as a cartoon, I think you could probably potentially even push the animation a little bit further, you know, really exaggerate poses and go for something extra. You know, you get the opportunity to do that with sort of cartoon characters, and it's sort of quite nice to see on a reel the variation between more sort of human and creature work and then more sort of cartoon sort of style as well. It sort of shows the range and that you sort of understand you know, principles of animation as well. It's sort of great, you've got sort of great movement on the ears. It would be nice to sort of play the ears up. I think, you know, Judy has those ears, they're a big part of her character, and just sort of, you know, really sort of exaggerate the movements and sort of have them sort of move around and, you know, react to things potentially before she does. But the little slides are great. I think potentially here, when she's first walking up to the elevator doors, it feels a little bit robotic. It would have been nice to actually put a little bit more, you know, a little bit more sort of sway in her sort of torso is very sort of stiff. It'd be quite nice to get a bit more rotations going on in there. Yeah, but you know, overall it's lovely. I love the little slide, and yeah, it's really successful. So I thought that was really cute, and yeah, just the fact there's sort of reflections going on. Sort of, you know, I'm such a sucker for pretty renders, and I do like at the end where she sort of stands there and gets angry, and she's got that little sort of head wobble of anger, which is quite a nice little detail, which is very subtle, but it still reads, and I think it works quite well. Okay, so the next thing that we have here, right, so here we have our sort of fighting robot guys. I don't know. Yeah, so we've got Mr. Blue and Mr. Red going on here. They're having a grand old time. The first thing, before I even sort of got to the animation, was just generally the camera that sort of threw me off a little bit. If you're going to be putting a move on the camera, do it for a sort of a kind of a purpose. The camera sort of seems to be in and out and zooming around and sort of stop-starting here, there and everywhere. I think if you're going to put a camera move on your shot, do it with the intent of framing your action, and keep it simple. Go from A to B. You know, you can just sort of do linear moves, which are always potentially slightly you know, more effective, unless you've got some sort of crazy, weird, sort of Doctor Strange kind of shot where you're sort of all over the place. You ideally just want to sort of have a linear move, potentially maybe even have had the camera, instead of raising up, just sort of keep it low, or even just have it as a lock off so we can sort of see the animation more. But I mean, yeah, that's sort of the notes on that. Sort of start off with, I like the little detail of the of the rope, of the ring, sort of bending and flexing as the robot sort of goes in and out. That's a nice little detail, and there's a little bit of a wobble on there, so that was great. I think overall the animation here is pretty good. I sort of feel like there's a little bit of issue with weighting. It sort of feels it feels a little bit light, and I sort of would have liked to have sort of seen sort of more sort of emphasis put on the throwdown. As we sort of come through, we have, as the red robot sort of lands on his back, his feet sort of come and hit the ground, but one foot doesn't quite make it. And I sort of thought, it's just sort of, you can just sort of see there, he doesn't quite hit. It would have been quite nice to sort of get that moment where he's a little bit just sort of, just added a pause beat there, just so you can sort of read the impact before they get up and start moving. What else have we got? We've got the blue robot. He's sort of coming through. Just this bit here where he comes through and does his sort of victory leap. It would have been nice to get a little bit of sort of anticipation going on with the final pose. He sort of pretty much stands straight up and then puts his leg down. It would be nice to sort of get that and then put a bit of force into it. So sort of get up, hold it for a beat, and then come down. And we sort of go swiftly into the final pose. It would have been nice to just sort of do a bit of an ease out there, and then maybe just hold it for a couple of seconds longer, or just a second longer, just to sort of read that. But overall, it's pretty good. It's pretty hard with this kind of stuff when you've got characters on the ground with intersecting geometry, and sort of here where you can sort of see the red robot, you can see his knees are actually going through the floor. It is a tricky thing to do, but it's sort of just that sort of detail, which is sort of, if you can avoid that, then that would be, so much more successful. But yeah, I mean, overall it's pretty nice animation. So let's go to, I think we're going back to Judy again. So Judy here, the little scramble is really nice. I really didn't have much to comment on this. It was sort of, I thought the animation was lovely. She sort of, the follow through on the air animation, just the little scramble was great. So I can't really contribute anything more to that. It was really quite nice. Then we're going on to Lioness. Okay, so again, this one, creature work is always quite tricky, and I think out of all the animation on the reel, this is probably the weakest. The animation, the weighting doesn't feel quite right, and the animation feels sort of quite stiff. It's always sort of, I've recently had to do a lot of animation on walls and things like that, and I sort of know that you really have to do a lot of sort of study as to what the emotion is, and it also helps. It's essential. I mean, regardless of how good an animator you are, sometimes the rig just isn't built for the movement that you want it to do as well, which, I don't want to use that as excuses, but sometimes that's just the case, and, things just don't quite end up looking, how they should. But I kind of feel as she jumps down, the front feet landing feels good, but the back feet feel a little bit too slow, a little bit too delayed, a little bit soft. It would be nice to have sort of a bit of a harder landing. The tail obviously not quite doing what a tail potentially should do. I always find a good trick with any sort of tail motion is to sort of get the main poses in, and then obviously you're going to have your controllers going down to the tip of the tail. Get your poses in and then just offset the keys as you step down from the tail, and that way you can sort of get the sort of the nice fluid movement, which is it's a quite an easy sort of trick to do. It only has to be by maybe 2 or 3 frames per sort of lot of controllers, and you can get sort of quite effective simple movement doing it that way. The head shake again feels quite stiff. It feels like the whole head is sort of going. You sort of want to be able to sort of get that follow through. Sort of more of a sort of a sway. I know it's sort of quite an aggressive move, but it just feels very, it doesn't feel like it feels very sort of stop start on there. So and then the last thing I think I have on this was just again the camera move. I was in two minds because I thought I quite like the rotation that you've got on the camera, but then it abruptly just stops. And it would have been nice just to just keep it at a constant speed and bring it round. It's not distracting from the animation itself, because the animation is still central in the frame. But maybe we've come a little bit too far around on the rotation, and it could have just been a little bit slower. But yeah, I sort of think, you know, it needs a little bit more work on this. I think this would have been a sort of a good first pass, but I think it needs a little bit more finesse and adding a bit more detail into the animation. And then we go to the lip sync.
He asked you out on a date. You did?
Yes.
Did I accept?
Yes. I'm going on a date.
Yes, you are.
Oh man, I can't believe this. I finally get asked out on a date and I missed it.
So the overall animation here is really successful. The sort of the nuances and the details and the fingers, just the sort of, yeah, I think it's great. The only thing I think at the start, the lip sync is a little bit disjointed from the audio, so it sort of feels like we're a little bit delayed. But you know, overall, it's a nice little bit of animation. I mean, I don't know again what the rig was like. It would have been nice to potentially push the expressions a little bit more. But no, I think, you know, it's a really successful, and again, it looks lovely. It's sort of presented nicely. And you know, the way you've still got your background music playing, and it sort of dips down to allow you to hear the dialogue as well. So yeah, it works really, really well. And then we have finally ending up with Judy again. Okay, so this one I felt you could sort of make a lot more of the animation on Judy at this point. Obviously she's sort of starting to get really frustrated, and we sort of play these beats really, really quite quickly. I think when she comes through and does the stomp, the hand just sort of goes in like that. It would have been quite nice to really sort of get in and sort of hold that beat for a little minute. And even when she turns around and sort of does the little fist shake, it's so quick, it's almost unreadable. So it'd be nice to just sort of make a little bit more of a moment of that. And then when she walks off, it would have been nice to, rather than having sort of like a generic kind of walk cycle that we've sort of put on her hair, it is a little bit, you know, I can sort of see you've tried to make it look like she's sort of angry, but it might have been nicer to sort of have her stomp off, clenched fists, arms straight, and sort of just, you know, you can sort of leaning that body forward like she's like angry and sort of, you know, she's going to take the stairs now, you know, that's kind of it. But yeah, I think out of all those sections with Judy, this was the one that I think you could have really sort of played on it a little bit more, and it would have really helped sort of add that gag sort of moment to it, and just say, right, she's really irate now, and she's off, so she's had enough. And then just the little the detail of the doors opening at the end was sort of, you know, it's just a fun little thing to finish on. But yeah, I mean, overall a very successful reel. And then if we go through and have a wee look at the reel itself, the title card, nice and simple. I mean, I know you've put your email address on the end, which is fine. You could have put that at the beginning. One thing you want to not do is obviously put your phone number on your title cards, because otherwise you're going to get weirdos phoning you. Not just me, but other weirdos. You know, so, but yeah, I think overall this was a really lovely reel, and it's, you know, by the fact you've got your sort of cartoon animation, you've got lip sync, you've got humanoids, and you've got quadrupeds, a sort of a creature work. It sort of shows a good sort of range, and it sort of shows us where you are in terms of your animation. So we can sort of go, right, this person might be more suited for, you know, just character animation, or this person might excel at creatures, and that could be something that they could pursue, or we could use them. You know, we know we've got a few shows coming up that might have creatures, and you know, that you guys would, you know, have fun doing. So yeah, I think it's a lovely little reel, say 1 minute, which is just right, and it gives us, you know, the fun little gag at the end just makes it memorable. So yeah, well done Laura. I think it's really great. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if I've gone over a little bit. So we're good. Are we going on to the next one? Or
I had a question about you mentioned the camera animation.
Yeah.
Robots fighting. Do you think like parenting the camera to the robot that gets slammed down could have been an interesting shot? Parenting your cameras to your actors, or yeah, it's always a bit dodgy, because you just end up keeping everything in frame while your background is moving around, and it's an effect that
isn't so great unless you're doing it for a really good reason. I think they had it on Mitchell and Webb Look. There was a sequence called Edgar Chicken Digby Caesar, where they constrain the camera to the actor while he's running, and it's something that's very infrequently used because it's quite disorientating to the viewer. You could sort of a little bit vomit-inducing, so I would avoid potentially attaching cameras. I mean, in the past, if we've had to follow creatures or like I say, I've just finished on Thrones, so we would obviously have to have cameras following the path of the dragons and being able to shoot people riding dragons, and we would always constrain the camera to the dragon, but we'd do it not as a sort of as a constraint, but we wouldn't be 100% constrained. We'd maybe only 50%, and it'd still give us the freedom to sort of move the camera around and create sort of nice sort of shots. But sticking things directly or constraining directly to a character is not a great thing unless you've actually got a really good reason to do it. So, right, are we? Yeah.
Same question about focusing. Camera focus, is it sort of bad thing to do it automatically on certain object?
Putting the focus of the, oh, you mean like adding a depth layer? So,
for example, on the robots.
Oh, on the robots. No, I mean you can focus your camera on the robot. You can have the camera tilting and panning to follow the robots, but you don't want your camera. You sort of think a camera, when you see stuff on, I'm thinking live action or even sort of CG films, a lot of the time, unless it's a steady cam move, a lot of the time the cameras are going to be linear because they're shot on tracks or on cranes, and so moves are very sort of simple, and like I say, it can become easily distracting. If you're selling an animation reel, you don't want to start doing crazy camera work just for the sake of it. You want to sell your animation, so you want to make, you want the framing of your shots to sell your animation, so you want to have a reason. You sort of have to think of your camera placement, So, like I say, if you want to have a character that you want to feel heroic, obviously put your camera lower so you're looking up at them, and then they'll have that grand sort of, up angle. Again, if you want to make your characters feel diminutive, put your camera high looking down, and it makes them feel a little bit smaller. So it's sort of just using all these tricks to be able to, frame your subjects, but it's also a way of storytelling. So, it's something that you can think of, but a lot of the time it's in sort of a subconscious thing to do, and unless you can obviously see it when it's wrong because it will catch you, but if you don't notice the camera, then it's obviously done correctly. So, anyone else? Okay. Thanks, everyone.